Hello everyone, welcome back to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where I look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week, I am going to be looking at Hyoh from Opus 16, Wall from Opus 14, Twintania from Opus 16, Meia from Opus 16, and finally, Celes from Opus 15. So, all fairly recent cards. Right, first up we have Hyoh, who is a 1 CP, 3000 power lightning forward. With the abilities pay 1 lightning, Hyoh gains haste and Hyoh's power becomes 7000. And then pay 3 lightning, Hyoh gains, if Hyoh deals damage to your opponent, the damage becomes 2 instead, and Hyoh's power becomes 10,000 power. You can only use the ability if Hyoh has 7000 power or more, and these effects do not end at the end of the turn. So basically you can pay the lightning and then he'll just have that effect permanently, which is really, really cool. I feel like there should be a keyword or something rather than having to right at the end of so many different effects. These effects do not end at the end of the turn. I don't know how you do it, but still. But yeah, he's a decent little card. He doesn't see a huge amount of play just due to the fact that he's initially quite fragile and your opponent can respond by you buffing him by just killing him, which kind of sucks. But he can also blindside your opponent and come out of nowhere. So, Jake. When a forward other than Jake enters the field, the forward gains plus 4000 power until end of turn, and then you can dull Jake to choose a forward and give it haste. So basically, you can play Hyoh into the field, it immediately becomes a 7000 power forward, and then you can give it haste with Jake's ability as well. Now, obviously, the alternative to this is just play Hyoh and then pay 1 CP, and then you get the same effects. But the difference here is that Jake is a static effect as well, so that means you can play other forwards and they will gain the plus 4000 power as well. It depends on the type of deck you're building. But that means that you then only have to pay the 3 additional lightning CP to be able to make Hyoh a then 10k forward that can attack twice, and he has haste as well. So it's basically the same effect as you having paid the 1 lightning, but in this case it just comes from a forward instead. Chalinka. So Hyoh is one of those cool cards that he says if he deals damage, the damage becomes 2 instead. So he isn't attacking twice and dealing 2 points of damage. The damage is just becoming 2. So if you make him attack twice as well, he can then deal 4 points of damage, which is really cool. Puck. So Hyoh's gonna die because he's really fragile. Also quite effective if you do manage to make him a 10k forward as well. So being able to play him back onto the field would be quite nice. And Puck, I've raved about this card before, but I really like Puck, especially at damage 3 when you can then play a 2 cost onto the field as well. But yeah, just play Puck, choose 1 forward, cost 1 in your break zone, play it onto the field. Not bad. Mid-Brevia, similar sort of thing. When a party you control attacks, choose 1 active forward your opponent controls, deal 8000 damage. So it might be a case that Hyoh and something, or Mid-Brevia for example, are party attacking together. You then get to deal an active forward 8k damage, at which point there is no blockers. You then get to deal your opponent point damage, which actually becomes 2 because Hyoh is a part of that party. Bartz, so rather than retrieving from your break zone, playing it from your deck. So when Bartz forms a party and attacks, you may search for 1 forward of cost 1 and play it onto the field. So yeah, I mean just Bartz and Boko probably. Party attack, you get to search a Hyoh, and then you'd probably want to be in the lightning wind for this to be able to work properly, because otherwise Hyoh's kind of pointless in the deck. But him immediately having haste is nice, but you still have to make him the 7k, so you still need to be able to play that, or pay, sorry, the 1 lightning to make him 7k, but still be able to search him from your deck and then bring onto the field, especially with something like Bartz and Boko and searching all these other 1 costs as well, means your opponent's then on a timer. Alcid. So obviously you can play Alcid and you could play Hyoh or something else if you really wanted to, but the play here ultimately is that when Hyoh would attack, you then get to dull one of your opponent's forwards out of the way with Alcid, and if Alcid also plays ice forward onto the field, you get to freeze stuff as well. So it means that you're dulling stuff with Hyoh and hopefully freezing them out with Alcid as well. And not to mention the fact that Alcid normally combos into something like Zeramus. Zeramus is also great for this because at the end of your opponent's turn, you get to dull all your opponent's forwards. If you've got Hyoh, that then means you're going to be dealing them with 2 points of damage, not to mention the fact that Alcid and Zeramus could probably attack as well. Spice Sicilian. Yeah, this is a really cool combo together. So Spice Sicilian, dull, choose 1 forward. It can only be blocked by a forward of cost equal to or inferior to its own this turn. So Hyoh can only be blocked by a 1 CP forward, which would be unlikely. Not many people run 1 CP forwards, and there are still a few in the game at the moment, but still, just making it so that it can't be blocked unless it's a 1 CP means your opponent has to either break Hyoh or break Spice Sicilian. Like I said, monsters, or like I said before, monsters are generally quite easy to kill, but not that much monster removal is run. So either your opponent has to get rid of a 10k Hyoh, or they have to get rid of Spice Sicilian. But either way, these two together are a nightmare. And then finally Go-Go, because obviously you have to put Go-Go in this. But yeah, you can obviously pay the lightning, and then Go-Go will become at least a haste forward, which you could maybe combo into using his Mimic S if you use another S of another forward. Or you just go for the big brain play and pay 3 lightning to make Go-Go a 10k that deals 2 points of damage as well. Obviously you can only use that on Hyoh if Hyoh is a 7k forward, but still, yeah, having 2 forwards that are 10k that can deal 2 points of damage on damage is pretty scary. Right, next up we have Wall. So he's a 6 CP 8k Earth forward with the ability, when Wall enters the field, you may play 1 category Mobius forward from your hand onto the field. And at damage 3, Wall gains plus 1000 power, Brave, and Wall cannot be broken by opposing summons or abilities that don't deal damage. So yeah, a really nice way to be able to play some very expensive cards. Kimahri. So at damage 3, Wall gains Opus 1 Vincent's effect of just not being able to be broken by opposing summons or abilities that don't deal damage. So it has to be dealt damage. But if you have Kimahri on the field, he then can't be dealt damage by summons or abilities. So you've got the whole Soirees effect going there. Has to be dealt damage, but can't be dealt damage. So yeah, no break effect is going to kill him, and no damage is going to kill him, well, through summons or abilities. So basically, Wall can only die through battle damage, being put into the break zone, or his power being reduced to 0. So yeah, it's going to be really annoying for your opponent. Obviously, your opponent could get rid of Kimahri as well, or just blank Wall, but still, those are 2 also quite awkward things to do. Yasma. Yeah, as I mentioned before, you can play Wall to then play Yasma onto the field. And let's say you've got 4 backups, you pay 2 backups and discard a card, play Wall onto the field, then play Yasma. You can then reactivate your backups, at which point you've just discarded a card to play Wall and Yasma, which is really good value. And Yasma is also a problem for your opponent as well, because, you know, being able to reactivate your stuff every turn, if you're up against Ice, then that would be a nightmare for them. Or if they just play lots of big forwards, being able to break them Yasma. Yasma's just a really good card, not to mention the fact it's just 10k as well. So yeah, just, that's a horrible thing for your opponent to have to face off against. Heretical Knight Garland. Yeah, Wall, Heretical Knight, then makes Wall a 12k, could be potentially a 13k if you damage 3. And obviously Wall has, Heretical Knight has his own defense mechanisms as well. But yeah, just being able to make it so that Wall is huge and hard to get rid of is horrible. Meia. So I actually really like this card. I haven't seen him played much recently, but I still think it's got a lot of good effects on there. So at the beginning of your attack phase, select 1 of the 3 following actions. If you have 5 points of damage, select 2 of the 3 following actions. Choose them forward until the end of the turn against 1000 power and first strike. Choose them forward, dull it, or choose one category Mobius forward other than Meia against haste until the end of the turn. So Wall into Meia to then give Wall haste and potentially 1000 power and first strike as well if you get 5 damage, or just dull out one of your opponent's forwards. Wall then attack, and again, if you are getting 2 of Meia's effects off, that means Wall will also be 1000 power and Brave as well, so he's going to be constantly poking through, you constantly dulling out stuff. It's going to be just a horrible combo for them, and like I said before, also potentially give him first strike as well, which means if your opponent does have to block, chances are Wall's going to be getting through because he's going to be big. Leonis. I really like Leonis, but yeah, his cost gets reduced for every Earth character you control. So let's say you play Leonis for, I don't know, 6 CP. That's still fine, because then you get to play Wall from your break zone onto the field, at which point you get to play a Mobius character from your hand, which is, or sorry, a Mobius forward from your hand, which again could be, you know, just the myriad of different Mobius forwards there are out there. I mean, I'm not going to go through every single one, but stuff like BFA and Yasma are just really insanely good value. And to have paid 6 CP to gain 3 forwards is just really good. Tama. I love Tama, what can I say? And just having Tama on your backup line and your opponent's turn open with a couple of open backups means your opponent has to worry, because that's like, you can play literally any forward or any character actually. So, but during your opponent's turn, you play something like Wall, you then play another forward again like BFA or Yasma or something huge. It's just hilarious fun, and that's why I love Tama. Wall and Magic Pot. So when Wall is put from the field into the break zone, you get to play a Warrior of Light from your break zone onto the field, at which point you can then go search the 6 CP Earth Wall to then play that onto the field, to then play a Mobius forward onto the field as well. So, you know, it could be a case that you just need to get this Wall onto the field before you draw it, because having that Wall there and this Wall in hand is effectively a dead card until this Wall dies. But yeah, you could be in some sort of Earth Mobius warrior-like deck, which I think would actually be a lot of fun, especially if you consider the fact that there's a couple of Earth warriors. Like, I mean, you've got Wall, you've got Ingus, I think Kryl is one, So not a huge amount, but there's some, and you can combo that with something like Graph maybe, and then other Mobius forwards gaining that buff as well. But either way, I quite like the concept of just being able to break something. I mean, I was looking for a way to use Magic Pot, right? But Wall's also got a nice entry ability as well, the Light Wall, sorry, to get Warrior Lights to hand, play them onto the field when it breaks, and such this wall to play more forwards. Just a nice little consistency engine. Alright, next we have Twintania, a 2CP 8k dark forward monster thing. So Twintania is also a monster in all situations. Twintania enters the field dull. When Twintania enters the field or active Twintania becomes dull, place 1 Gigaflare counter on Twintania. At the beginning of main phase 1, during each of your turns, remove 1 Gigaflare counter from Twintania. When you do so, choose one forward your opponent controls, deal it 7,000 damage. So something that I always get confused, well, not I get confused with, that can get confused with this card, is that he doesn't deal the 7,000 when he activates. He gains a counter when he goes dull, but it's just at the beginning of your main phase when you deal damage, so you can't keep dulling and activating to keep on dealing 7k. So yeah, but also he is a monster in all situations. Now, all situations is one of those pieces of text which applies regardless of where the card is. Most cards' effects or abilities only matter when they're actually on the field. But when something says is a monster in all situations, that means it can be searched from the deck, it can play from the break zone, it can, from a hand, you know, it is a monster in literally every zone of the game. So Ewan, I actually quite like this little combo. So you go to your main phase 1, provided Twintania is allowed to activate. Provided Twintania is allowed to be there at the end of your opponent's turn, you go to your main phase 1, activate, deal 7k to something, you then play Ewan to the field, break whatever the forward was that got the 7k damage. Althea, you add that into the mix, and you have this funny little combo of basically being able to activate active phase, Twintania deals 7k to something, you play Ewan onto the field, kill that forward, Althea, Ewan back to hand, try and play Althea again, or just basically the idea here is being able to bounce, but you need to play Althea again, and then the following turn, you can Twintania, Ewan, Althea back to hand, and you see that every single time, basically, you're going to be able to be breaking something through Ewan, Twintania, and some means of bouncing. The problem is you want to be bouncing consistently. That's why I went with Althea, because even though she is a faux 2-cost backup, you're still going to have to pay that cost, so making sure that you still have the CP available to do that could be annoying, especially if you want to do other things as well, but it's a nice, consistent way to be able to hopefully be breaking something every turn, provided Twintania stays around. Luneth, another similar way of just being able to just hopefully finish something off. So Twintania deals 7k to something, you then go to attack phase. Luneth deals at least 1k if he's the only fire character you have on the field. Kind of sucks that's the case, but ultimately Twintania in a fire deck actually is really, really nice, and Luneth just being able to deal just even a couple of k on top of that means that Twintania is effectively dealt 9k. So yeah, just a nice way to be able to finish off loads of things. Chivalry. So, Twintania's effect will stack, at which point you can then cast Chivalry on Twintania. And then Chivalry will resolve, Twintania resolves, hopefully deals 7k to something that kills it, at which point your opponent then discards a card. And then Twintania is also massive when you go to attack, so if your opponent's forced to block with, or block Twintania as well, that means that when that forward dies, they also have to discard another card. Manasvin and Warmech. So again, at the beginning of your main phase, Twintania's effect will stack. You can then just pay the 1 fire and dull Warmech to make it so that Twintania starts dealing 9k. You've got 2 Warmechs, they'll start dealing 11k every turn. Yeah, and this is why Twintania never sticks around for very long. And that's why you also play it with Quattro Queen, because like I said, Twintania is a monster in all situations, even though technically it's a forward. So Quattro Queen, you play it onto the field, you grab Twintania, it is a monster, but it's also a forward, which means you can play it then immediately onto the field. It does come into the field dull, but still it means your opponent has to now find another way of getting rid of Twintania. Right, Meia. So she's a weird, this is a case of a, so we just looked at Twintania, which is a forward, but also a monster in all situations. This is very much the case of having a forward, which is basically just a monster. So Meia is a 1 CP 7k water forward with haste, and Meia cannot attack or block. So similar to the Fat Chocobo from Opus 16. But then also dull, cast 1 summon from your hand. The cost required to cast it is reduced by 3 and can be paid using CP of any element. It cannot become 0. Remove the summon from the game after use instead of putting it into the break zone. So you have to be mindful of the fact that it's not a summon that you're going to be wanting to use or reuse a lot of times. So maybe just a one-off or something which is just a get out with you, get you out of a sticky situation fast. But yeah, there's lots of cool summons that can work well with, especially due to the fact that it can be paid with CP of any element as well. So Ash, being able to, I don't know, dull Meia, cast a summon for, I don't know, a 4 CP summon for 1 CP, that's fine. You can then use Ash to reactivate, I don't know, that 1 CP which you just dulled for it, or reactivate Meia to then use Meia's ability again to dull and cast another summon on the cheap as well. So yeah, being able to use Meia twice in one turn is, I mean, unless you've got a lot of summons in your deck, you're going to run out of your summons because obviously they get removed from the game, but still a nice way just to be able to get things out of the way and hopefully deal a point of damage. Yuna, yeah, just being able to make it so that your water summons at least cost 4 CP less as well. You can go colorless with your summons with Meia, but still, water summons becoming 4 CP less is really cool. So for example, something like Bismarck or Remora, not Bismarck, sorry, Remora is what I was thinking of, which is normally 6 CP, making that a 2 CP. Is really, really good, especially because that card loves you to have lots of cards in hand. So not having to discard cards to use his ability means it's even more powerful. Doga. So if you're using Meia, chances are you are casting a summon of 4 or more. I mean, you could be casting a summon of 3 and making it only a 1 cost, which is perfectly fine because it can't become 0 with Meia's effect. But yeah, at which point that will trigger Doga's effect to then choose a backup of 3 or more your opponent controls and break it, which would be really annoying because Meia can probably play a lot of big summons. Terra. So again, being able to play summons on the cheap and then also getting to dull or freeze both a forward and a backup every single time you cast a really cheap summon is just nightmarish. And also, if you're running something like Meia, chances are you can be running lots of summons in the deck, at which point that will work well with Terra's entry effect of when she enters, reveal as many summons from your hand as you want, at which point you get to dull and freeze as many characters as summons you revealed on your opponent's field. So yeah, these two work nicely together. Rydia from Opus 17. Sorry about the crappy quality, but I can't find a better one. So when Rydia enters the field, you search for 2 summons each with a different cost. Then your opponent selects 1 card among them and puts it into the break zone. Add the other to your hand, so that's fine. But if you've got Meia on the field, chances are your opponent's going to make you bin the bigger summon, which is understandable, but that's why you go for 2 big summons, 1 6 and 1 5. And when you cast a summon, choose one for the opponent controls, it loses 1000 power for each CP required to cast the summon till the end of the turn. And that is the printed cost of the summon, not the amount you paid for it. So you might have a 5 CP summon in hand, and you only pay 2 with Meia's effect, at which point you still get to reduce the forward by 5 using Rydia's effect. And the great thing about Rydia as well is that you can search any 2 summons of any 2 elements. So that means it doesn't matter if you're mono water, go search yourself, I don't know, Diablos and a Phoenix, and then Meia can still be used to cast them on the cheap. Syldra. So let's talk about some of the summons that Meia works really well with. So Syldra's a great one because even though you're removing Syldra from hand, you're paying 1 CP to search 2 cards to hand, which is really, really good. Syldra typically isn't a card that gets replayed a lot unless you're looking for that one specific get out of jail free card. But just consistency wise, that's really, really good. If you're on 2 backups, you pay 1 for Meia. You then dull Meia to cast Syldra for 1. You then go search 2 more backups potentially ready for your turn. I don't know, 2, 3, to play those 2 backups as well. Or you can just play them then and there if you have the cards in hand. Either way, just really good consistency-wise. Odin, so a card that has its own cost reduction anyway. So for every Odin in the break zone, this Odin costs 1 CP less, but it's just choose one forward, break it. Nice and simple. You obviously need to be wary of this because if you're running lots of Odins and Meia, with this Odin, Meia is going to be removing the summons you cast, which means if you're removing the Odins, then this Odin isn't going to be as cheap. But still, you could have a couple of Odins in your break zone, and you dull Meia to cast this Odin for just 1 CP. That's really, really good, given the fact that it gets to break literally any forward. Mind Flayer. Just play Mind Flayer for 1 CP. Get to cast something for 1 CP from your opponent's deck. Enough said, really. Zodiac, Keeper of the Precepts. So you do need to be careful of the downside to this card, which is, well, let's go through the card. If you control a Dark Forward, the cost to cast Zodiac, Keeper of the Precepts is reduced by 3, so that's really good already. But then break all the forwards your opponent controls, you receive damage equal to the number of forwards broken by this effect. So you break 3 forwards, you take 3 damage. You can obviously combo this with something like Gabranth, where you put it into the damage, or sorry, you put him into the break zone. The next damage you receive is 0, so even though you would take, say, 3 from Zodiac, it actually becomes 0 because it's 1 lump of damage. Similar to Hyoh earlier, which we were talking about, it's 1 damage, but twice, so you take both damage, you don't do it in order. So Yeah, it's just kind of one instance of damage. But anyway, yeah, it's got its own built-in cost reduction anyway, so it can become a 4 CP forward, which is really good. You then use Meia, it then becomes a 1 CP forward. So if you're going for that final push for game and you put yourself to 6 damage, it doesn't matter if you can break all your opponent's forwards and just swing through with everything else. Mattias the Corrupt. So it used to be played a lot, but not really anymore due to the fact that it's quite high cost and it's kind of restrictive. But it is a EX burst. Your opponent puts 1 attacking forward they control into the break zone. And the reason I like this card is because it's not a break, it's put into the break zone and your opponent selects it. So unless your opponent is attacking with 2 forwards or party attack, they have to always put that attacking forward into the break zone. So they attack with something big which you don't want to target. Doesn't matter because you're not targeting it because your opponent is just putting it into the break zone. And Mattias will only cost you 2 CP with Meia, which is pretty good in my opinion. So your opponent could have something like, I don't know, Thanos or BFA. They're attacking with that. Use Meia, pay Mattias for 2 and just get to put it in the break zone. Not too bad. Diablos. So you can obviously reactivate your backups, reactivate your forwards, but it can always be really annoying when you don't quite have all the CP available to be able to use Diablos. So just having it so that you can make Diablos cost only 2 is really, really good. Obviously it does get removed, so make sure it isn't a card you want to keep on using. But yeah, being able to reactivate all your backups, so maybe you've got 5 backups but you only have the 2 available. Dull Meia, play the 2, Diablos, and this can actually play mind games with your opponent as well, so it could be you in water, wind, or just mono water. Just have those 2 water backups open, you dull the 2, dull Meia to play Diablos, reactivate all your backups, all your forwards, which means you get to reactivate Meia, and you could then cast another summon if you wanted to using Meia's effect, or just do some other funny things as well. And then finally, Phoenix. Yeah, Phoenix for 4 CP to deal 8k something and play a forward of 3 or less from your break zone to field dull. Not too bad. And finally we have Celes. So she is a 4 CP 7k ice forward. With the text, when Celes enters the field, select one of the 2 following actions. Search for 1 card named Lock and add it to your hand. Or your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. And then when 1 or more category 6 forwards you control form a party and attack, select one of the 2 following actions. Choose up to 2 characters, freeze them, or choose 1 category 6 character in your break zone, add it to your hand. So there's a lot of text on there, but ultimately enter, discard or search, and then on a party attack with at least 1 6 character, freeze 2, or get something back to your hand. And that's really good as well, because it doesn't require you to have 2 6 characters attacking. It can be just Celes and literally another forward. Party attack, freeze 2 things, which is surprisingly offensive. So, backup lock, actually, being able to play Celes to get this lock, and this might be a nice out of you just not drawing any backups. You play Celes to search this lock, you play lock onto the field, which I realise is 8 CP, and actually that's probably 6 cards from hand, so kind of sucky. But either way, play a lock onto the field, you then say backup, you then find more backups as well. So at least helps you with the consistency a little bit. And it also means you are going fairly aggressive, so your opponent is forced to react with killing Celes. And then obviously lock as well. You play Celes onto the field to then get to search this lock. Now lock's cost will be reduced by 2 at least because you played Celes. You can obviously play other things as well, at which point they'll reduce lock's power and then bring him onto the field and he does horrible stuff. Rosa. So this could be quite fun. So let's say you've got Celes, Rosa, and Lock on the field. Party attack with Celes and Rosa. You then get to freeze 2 characters or choose 6 characters in your break zone, add it to your hand. Rosa will then activate. You can then party attack with Rosa and Lock, and then get to trigger Celes' effect again, and freeze 2 characters, and or just get another 6 character back to your hand from your break zone. You throw Snow into the mix, and then you've got a horrible situation for your opponent. So Celes and Rosa, they both attack. They can both now dull and freeze 2 of your opponent's forwards. Rosa reactivates, then Rosa and Lock can party attack, dull and freeze 2 more of your opponent's forwards if they have 4 forwards, and also just freeze 2 backups or monsters or whatever. But yeah, Celes being able to freeze characters is really, really good. So it means you can also freeze monsters, so maybe something like Tross as being a pain, or yeah, just any of the monsters. Being able to freeze them out and using that with Snow and Rosa to be able to get the party attack off and dulling forwards out of the way. Just nice little combo. Noctis, another fairly obvious one, but yeah, just being able to activate any of Noctis' abilities on the party attack alongside Celes' stuff as well. So yeah, if you have a party of 3 or more forwards, you get to select 2 of the 5, but otherwise it would be 1. So choose a forward, deal at 8k, choose a monster, break it, choose 1 character, dull it and freeze it. Noctis gains haste within the turn, or draw 1 card. So there's loads of things on there that Noctis can do, but ultimately being able to freeze 2 characters, potentially or just getting a card back to hand with Celes, and then doing something else with Noctis as well, is just horrible. And Opus 17 Salmon! I really like this card. I think it's really, really good. And it's another card which just has an S of just a simple discard. So his cost is reduced by 1 for each 6 character you control. So that means at least Celes would mean he becomes 3, which is fine. But every single time you get to party attack with, well, party attack at all with a 6 character, 6 forward even, you can then get back Sabin's S to your hand, which you can then keep on holding in hand to then reactivate using Sabin's Chakra, or just dealing something AK with Aura Cannon. Either way, just having Celes there and Sabin there means your opponent's kind of forced to respond, otherwise you're just going to keep on getting Sabin's S off every single time you party attack. And finally, Morrow. So the forwards you control can form party with forwards of any element. I mean, there's a lot. You could be mono ice, which is perfectly fine, as long as Celes or another 6 characters party attacking, you're alright. But if you are on fire and you just have the 1 fire forward and the 1 ice forward, it kind of sucks. So you have a means of being able to merge those 2 and just be able to party attack with them anyway is always nice. There's some in water as well, so you could be going tricolor potentially, or you could run something like Mimic, which can party attack with forwards of any element. But either way, just being able to make it so that you can party attack even though you're forwards of different elements is nice. Cool, there we go. So yeah, Opus 17 is just over the hill, and I think 6 is going to get a bit more play now, because obviously you've got the new Edgar and the new Sabin, as well as a few other cards. And it looks like a lot of fun. That Sabin is really, not Sabin, sorry. The Edgar is really, really cool, being able to make it so that you don't have to pay the S of an S ability, and making things a lot cheaper. And as you can imagine, there's a fair few tasty combos in there. It is forwards of 3 or more, I believe, so you can't use it on something like Mog. But either way, being able to make it something like, I don't know, Go-Go, for example, doesn't have to use his S, and also Go-Go mimics the Edgar ability as well. If you haven't seen the card, go look it up. But yeah, Opus 17 is on the way. I'll also be doing a set review of, well, not set review, but a review of the Golbez Celes starter deck as well, and there's quite a few good cards in there, especially the Rydia. That Rydia and the Anniversary Box Una are 2 really good cards together, obviously due to the power loss effects, and both summoners as well. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of the Golbez starter deck as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video.